Welcome to Wire Guild. The tutorial I'm going to show you is a pendant. However, I'm also going to show you how to adapt that pendant so that you can make a bracelet, you could make earrings with it if you wanted. It's very versatile. I like versatile. So depending on what size you want to make, I've made quite a large pendant. You probably want to make a smaller one, I don't know, but you're going to need some square wire. I used 21 gauge. You're going to need some half round. I used both 18 and 21, whatever you've got in. Some thinner wire to attach your beads, and then of course beads to dangle from the pendant. So I've laid everything out, and I have 6 wires that are probably about 3 inches long, maybe 4. And then I've got 2 wires that are a bit longer. I've got a bit of chain that I'm kicking around, my finer wire and my half round wire. Now you'll see in a minute why 2 of the wires are longer. Just decided, yeah. I'm going to use about that much for bales, and then the rest of it will be pendant. The reason we have 2 pieces of wire that are different is we're going to alter these 2 pieces of wire so that we can attach our beads to them. So I'm going to grip together with round nose pliers and then start bending. Now you can see I'm splitting the wires so that one goes to one side and one goes to the other. Otherwise you'd sort of semi-fasten them together. I don't suppose it'd matter, it just tends to be the way that I do it. I do them together because I want the little curls that I'm putting in. I'm just going to straighten that one up, it's just a little. They always end up a little bit skew-whiffer, but you can always go back in and just straighten them into loops. Just even that up. I do them together because we want the loops to be matching in like matching pairs down the length. It doesn't matter how far apart you leave them, how close together they are, how many of them you have, as long as they match. So I've got one of these really stupid rulers that is all a scale ruler, but it doesn't make any difference as long as I use the same thing every time. It doesn't matter the gap I'm putting between. I think I've got about 1 centimetre there, which is probably just over 1/4 of an inch, that sort of thing, not quite 1/2 an inch. And I'm putting another curl in there all the way around, and once I've got the curl in, you see, I can drop the other wire and even it up so that it sits in place. If you were super duper organised, you could get a Sharpie pen and you could take your wires and mark them all up in exact distances away from each other, knowing exactly where you're going to put your loops, but I'm afraid I'm never that organised. Now can you see how that's bending that way and that's that way? Just, yeah, that's it. You want to try and keep, we're using square wire, so you want to try and keep your square wire as straight as possible. Now I'm just going to whiz the film forward a bit while I keep talking to you. I'm going to put 5 pairs of loops in. I usually go for odd numbers, 3s, 5s, you know, that sort of thing, or even just 1 pair. It depends how big a pendant you want. So I've got my piece of wire here now with 5 little loops in, and my dog's going mad because somebody's obviously walked past the house, right? And let's just even that up a bit. Now I've got them so that my circles match. Now can you see the way the lines are laying? One sort of upwards, and then that one's back down. Then they're not all straight. It really doesn't matter. As long as you've got them as straight as you can get them, you know, it doesn't matter. So now I'm going to get my shorter wires and I'm going to put 1 wire there, which is going to be in the middle. Even that up. Make sure they're flat. Make sure those circles are parallel. There we go. And that the little loops are pointing upwards. There we If you wanted a very delicate pendant, or if you were making, say, an earring, you would probably only need one strand that's got the loops in, and then maybe one strand of wire on either side of it. You could make this with just one. Just one would be easier. You wouldn't fight as much to get them neat and still. But I thought I'd show you the one that I prefer to make. Now I'm just getting my half round wire, and I'm just using whatever I've got handy in it. It happens to be 21 gauge because that's just what's here on my desk, but you could use 18, you could use whatever half round wire you've got. Actually 18 would probably be easier than the 21 that I'm using, but it doesn't matter. Now I've got all my wires nice and straight, and I'm going to take my binding wire and wrap it around and then press it down with my pliers. And I'm straightening these wires all the time. You really need to get them flat and even. It's often when we look at things and we find them attractive, it is because there is a combination of two very different things. With this pendant, we're going for this very, very sort of sleek, smooth, straight lines, and then we're putting frothy little beads on it, if you like, on dangles. It's those two things that really make it more attractive. So I'm binding away here, and you noticed I started quite high. That's because this is going to produce my bail, and it's also going to give me a really nice strong framework. So you can see that I've bound all the way up to my little circles there. Now I'm going to go across the back, yeah, and then on the other side of the circle. Now fiddly bit, we need these wires to lay flat, and it is going to take some wriggling and some moving because they move all over the place. They have a life of their own. Let me just ease this a little bit further out, and then that one with the circle on will just fit in there. Sorry, I'm edging my hands closer and closer to myself. It's so that I can see better. Sorry about that. Right, and then we wrap that around. There we go, and then I'll press down with my pliers and then wrap it around. Depending on how much space you left between each of your circles will depend on how many wraps you get in between. I'm just going to keep going till I hit that next circle. I'm not really that bothered about counting, but I do squeeze down every time. As long as you squeeze down every time, it is so much easier to make sure that your wires are flat and that they're straight and that the binding is exactly where you want it to be. And like I say, when you're going for something that is two totally different ends of the spectrum, you have to make sure, you know. So I'm just closing those loops up together so that it's easier for me to reseat the wires, and I'm going to keep binding now in between all of the loops. Now then, let's have a look at this. You see, you could use it as a bracelet, and I'm going to show you how to do that later on, but it's so many things it lends it to. If you need a bracelet, you'd need longer wires, and you'd probably a heavier gauge binding wire, an 18, but I'm just wriggle this a bit more and keep binding. Now I'm running out of binding wire. I didn't quite have enough to do the whole thing in one piece, but that doesn't matter. I will cut this off on the back when I get my plier, the snips the right way around, and press that piece down. Down you go. And then I'll just start a new piece of wire. I'm going to trim that top piece off as well, and then I'm all nice and neat. All these little bits that I trim off go straight into a scrap pot, and what I tend to do is if I need a little... You've moved, haven't you? And a minute, we'll just get back where it ought to be. If I have any longer bits, I reuse them if I can at any point. I usually end up with sort of tiny scraps in the bottom, and then of course they're sent back to the manufacturers to be weighed in against a new order of silver. I need that to go in there. In you go. You can see how I'm using the pliers to try and make the wire flat all the time. It's because if you've got a flat-edged plier and you're holding it across a group of wires, it can't really go anywhere. It can't stick up or be double because there isn't room inside the pliers. I'll just get some more wire and I'm just going to bind around probably about 4 or 5 times. Again, it depends how much wire you've got left at this end. I've taken the 2 wires that had the loops on and I've bent them up. They're longer than the others, and I'm just going to trim them off. The reason I'm doing this is at the moment a very blocky piece of metal that we've created. I've gripped the end of the wires there, and I'm going to bend those in. That grip might be a little bit long and I'll probably have to trim them down a bit. And then I'm going to separate them and press them down either side of that bottom loop. What we're doing is we are fooling the eye into thinking that the pendant has come in a V shape at the bottom when it hasn't really. Bringing it in at a V shape would be very difficult, but by taking these 2 wires back up over the piece, you can fool the eye into thinking that that's what it's actually done. Now can you see how these bits are sort of sticking over the ends? That's no good. I want them on the top of the piece, and as we can see, they're too big. So let me just get the snips the right way around, Rachel. That's better. And just trim those down. It's very hard to get such a tiny little edge that's turned in, but if you bend it over first and then trim it back, it's a lot easier. And I can just press that at the bottom and then it will stay in place. So let's just lift that slightly, trim off that length, and then I can press it at the bottom and just tuck it in there. There we go. So you've got this illusion of your pendant coming in to a V shape. Now I'm going to wrap around another maybe 3 or 4 times just to firm up underneath where I moved those wires. Now let's see, how many have I got there? I think I've got about 5 or 6 now. You see how I've got one that's a bit longer than the others? Well, I'm just going to go across the bottom and neaten them up. You shouldn't really do this, you really ought to do 1 wire at a time, but they're really good at those snips, so it will let me. So now I am down to 5 wires. So I'm going to take 2 from one side. Let's just trim off that binding wire and press it down. Okay, 2 from one side and bend it underneath. Now I don't know if you can see, but I've sort of curled that in. That's to make sure that there is nothing that would sort of stick out and scratch. It's been moved inwards so any sharp edge is facing into the pendant, and 2 on the other side, and that is going to leave me with a single wire. Now if you wanted your pendant to stop at this point, you could just take that single wire and bend it in with the other 4 that we've just bent, but I'm going to make that into a little tiny hook. I might not have left myself quite enough room. Oh yeah, I can get in there. There we are. A little tiny hook. Don't close it up because we're going to put, remember that piece of chain I had? I'm going to just loop that over the top of the hook. Well, I would if it'd go on. Go on, in you go. There we are. Right then. So I can just close that hook up now and that will be secure. I'm not probably going to not use all that, but let's do the bail. So back to the top. Do you remember what I said about not cutting all through your wires? This is an easier way to do it if your snips aren't brilliant. If you go across the wires and squeeze, there we go, you will leave yourself a little indentation in the metal. Can you just see that if I wiggle it around? Then you can go in with your pliers and do 1 or 2 wires at a time, and you'll end up with a perfectly straight line because you already marked it. I've left a little bit at the end of my binding. They will go in the scrap pot. In you go. Don't lose any bits. Now, the bail itself I'm going to create by gripping these end wires that are sticking out, these little bits here, and curling this around the pliers. The reason we leave a little bit that's blank, that doesn't have any bindings on, is if you grip the bindings you'll split them. They'll sort of try and pull off the end of the wires. And then I'm just going to close that up with my pliers so it touches. I love that as a bail. It's super simple. It doesn't take anything away from what you're making. So really that's the basis of our pendant. Now if I was making a bracelet, which I've done to show you, you can see how I've just done 3 pairs of loops in the middle of my bracelet. This bracelet has 7 wires. I'm not going to go through a whole bracelet tutorial with you. I'm sure you've looked at others on the site, and you make it up in exactly the same way, but you just use the loops that we've used in the pendant. So I'm going to make the dangles now. So I've got myself some beads, and of course I've got a green again. I don't know, maybe it's because it's spring, but I do love green. And I'm just going to make lots and lots and lots of little dangles to go from the pendant. Now I just happen to have some 0.4 wire kicking around, 0.5, 0.6. I'm trying to think what they would be in gauges. Probably 22, 24 gauge. You could use any of these to make the dangles. Up to you. But I just had this handy, so I'm using this. So I'm going through a little bead. It's a little flat saucer shaped bead. So I am going to grip it in my pliers. My new baby wubbers, which, whoops, I haven't got used to yet. Let me just try that again. By gripping over the top of the wire, I'm not allowing the wire to move, you see, and then I can just wrap around the other wire about, I don't know, 3-4 times. It depends on how long you want the dangle to be. If you want really quite a long dangle, you could go around more times. If you wanted a really short one, just go around a couple of times. So there's my little bead on my little wire, and to attach it to our pendant I am going to grip with the round nose pliers, go all the way around to make a loop. I haven't closed the loop at all because I'm going to just pass it through. Go on, in you go. One of these little loops in the pendant, round nose pliers across where my wires cross, where we put that little loop in, and then I'm going to wrap that around, running up towards the bead, and that will hold it nice and firm and hold it in place on our pendant. What I usually do when I'm not doing a tutorial is I make all these little things up first. I wire all my beads up, and then I sit with them all over a tray, and then just don't pay that much attention to where I'm putting them. I've already chosen the colours, so I don't, it's not like, oh yes, I'll have 3 of that colour in that loop and I'll have 2 of that colour in that loop. I tend to like it to be a little bit more natural. These are really cute. They're like little sort of squelched, squished pearl things, and at the moment I can't get them off the string. There we go. The hole in this is a little bit different. It sort of goes through the top rather than through the middle, but I'm still going to wrap it exactly the same way. Cross the wire over and then wrap one end. Just going to hold that in the pliers. My fingers tend to get in the way sometimes. I don't know whether it's because my hands are larger, but I often find it easier to use my pliers because the end of the pliers is so much littler than my finger ends, which do get in the way. So just twist that in so that it lays down. You don't want little sharp bits on your pendant. Round nose pliers, grip onto the wire, make a loop all the way around, pass the loop through one of your circles on your pendant. It's finding different words for loops, circles, rings, whatever. Anyway, you know what I mean. Pass it through the pendant, fight with it for a bit, hold it where the wires cross with your round nose pliers. Come on, sit up. And then just wrap that wire around. You're really going back around itself, making sure that it's nice and secure and that it's not going to go anywhere. Trim off the end. Now this is going to take me a while. It is one of those pendants that you sit there and you work with, you know, and you with on. And to have you sitting there and watch me make every single bead that I put on it would be just, well, it'd be boring for starters. You've got the gist of how to do the beads, of how to attach them. I'm just opening up the loops here because I closed them together to make sure that I could get the bindings on straight. I can't really get to both of them, so I'm just opening each one slightly up just so that I can get in with the beads. There we go. That one needs to go out a bit further so that it's balanced. And I think I'll take some of this chain off. I didn't ever want all that much, I just wanted a bit on the end. The reason I put the chain on the end is to, again, you've got this very, very firm base of the pendant. You've got these beads that are full of movement, and I like to have a piece of chain on the bottom because it adds even more movement. It's just a different texture, if you like. It's an extra bit, but like I said, not necessary if you don't want it. So I'm going to keep going and filling all these with beads, and I'm going to whiz the film because, like I said, there's really no point. If you're going to use a very strong colour, and white is a strong colour because it does attract the eye a lot, I tend to put those on first, and I only use a few, and then I build my lighter colours on the top. So I've added quite a few beads. I've added some pink ones in with the green just to throw the green up a bit, and we're getting to the point where we're about 3/4 of the way through. I still haven't added any dangles to my chain, and I think I still need a few more on the pendant. However, I'm going to think about putting something on the bottom of that piece of chain. I like the lighter colour over the top. Do you remember what I said about use your strong colours underneath and then bring your lighter colours as the last ones that you put on? So I've got some little tiny peridot beads which I'm going to put on as sort of like the final layer, if you like. So I need a dangle for the bottom of that piece of chain. Now, in the past when I've shown you how to do wraps, I've always wrapped one wire. Sorry, go on, in you go. I've always bent the wires over together and then wrapped sort of the shorter wire around the other wire. This time I'm just going to twist them. So I've got my fingers over the top and I'm twisting the bead, and once you've got half a dozen twists in, you can just cut off one of the wires, the shorter wire. This will enable you to take another bead. Let me just, oh, they're still sealed, hang on a minute. Let me chop that open. Take a bead and thread it over the top. Now sometimes this will go, nah, in this case it won't. Those little beads are not going to go on. However, I've got a little Swarovski here, and that should slide straight over the twisted wires, so you get like a double bead. I'm not sure that I really like it. It's alright, but I don't know that. If I put that on the bottom of the chain, it's... no, I don't like that. Okay, we won't do that. We'll do something else. This is lots of things, hence the reason I have things that are already made up, because they didn't work on another piece. So they just go into a box, and eventually there will be something one day that I look at it and think, yeah, that goes with that. So I'm just going to try a little silver bead on the bottom, and I think one of these will go next to it, yeah. So wrap around like I did before, but I'm not going to twist this one. I'm going to hold the bead so that the wire goes all the way around, and then I'm just going to wrap around once, and then I'm going to add the next bead. Go on. Got such a teeny tiny hole I can't see it from there. That's just, sorry, I thought the camera was running out of battery. Pop that on there, and then down and around just a couple of times. And then we can use that. I moved the camera, haven't I? I can't quite see the bottom of my piece, sorry about that. Shift it further up. So I can trim off the wire and press that down. Can you see how I go in a circular motion when I press down? That's so that it's sort of pushing the wire over. It's not squidging it, it's smoothing it so that you don't get any sharp bits. Exactly the same way to attach this onto the chain. I'm going to put it on my round nose pliers, make a loop, pass it through the end of the chain. But instead of wrapping just around itself, I'm going to go around itself and then over the bead, and then I'm going to wrap in between, where's my pliers? There we go. I'm going to wrap in between the two beads. There we go, and snip off the excess and then press the end down in between. Just a slightly different way of doing it. You get a little ring of wire going around the bead. So I'm going to add some more of these paler coloured ones. I'm going to close that loop up so that my chain doesn't fall off. Forgot to do it before. Probably good to add quite a few crystally beads over the top to get a lighter colour, and I'm also going to add them to the bracelet as well, because it's a little bit sparse, but with a few more on, these lighter coloured ones, it should look really nice. So that's when they were finished. I got through doing them, and then I put them in my proper little light box, and we got some good shots of them there. So a pendant, a bracelet, possibly earrings. I can't wait to see what you make. Thank you for watching. Happy wrapping!